I feel like it's probably the most intimate and hopeful sounding record.
Some changed, I've got it, I'll suffer the same fate.
Hi, we're Interpol, and this is our track by track of our new album, The Other Side of Make Believe, for Enemy.
I'd like to see them win.
When we wrote Tony, it was like it was a great moment. It was actually during one of the 2 writing sessions that we had in the Catskills in upstate New York, and there was a piano in the living room. I started playing on the piano the song whatever, and then Paul just jumped right in with the bass, and then within a short amount of time, Sam was playing like a very dancey beat as per what's on the record, and it just felt like the foundation came together. What the song could be. It took a minute to sort of shape it, having go different directions where we wanted to go, figure out what it wanted to be. But at that moment, there was like a really great sense. So yeah, this could be like a fun song, and a song that could have, like, if I was just playing it by myself, it might have been like, this is going to be a pretty like weird left of center song, which has that quality to it. There was something about what both Sam and Paul was doing on the bass that just kind of like, I don't know, this could be like a really fun, dancey sort of rhythmic jam, and that's what it became.
Tony, lyrically, I envision it as a little bit fever dream, epiphany, hallucination, sunny afternoon drive kind of song. I mean, I think we decided to launch the record with Tony. We take a lot of, Matador's a great partner, and we take a lot of their input to heart with regards to which songs. I think to us, they're all, our babies, and I don't ever really feel like one song has particular priority over other ones. But I do think that Tony is just a very inviting kind of like a very inviting song, and I think a good kind of mission statement for this body of music where it's piano based, which is sort of a fresh thing for us, and then I think it's like danceable, and I think also has a pretty like hopeful, optimistic, and uplifting kind of lyrical quality, and just sonically it's also like a pretty positive track. So I think it's just a good foot forward. The video for Tony came together when we partnered up with this dude Van Alpert, who's a super talented and passionate video director, and we decided to kind of work with choreographed dance, and I think that was a really cool thing to do. I think an aspect of our band that we did really sort of underline on this record is the danceability of Sam's rhythms and his kind of like R&B influences, and I think using dance imagery over top an Interpol song is a really natural marriage that we just never had explored previously. So I thought Van had a great idea there.
It's time to make something stable.
Fables was one of those songs that I think we did by sending it around. I think I'd sent around the chord progression. I think it was maybe one of the last songs that we did before we got together in a room for the first time after a couple of years. The verses has like a little bit of like a slight eeriness, I find, but in a very compelling sort of, through Paul's vocals, like, the listener needs to, is being spoken to, in my opinion. And then the chorus has sort of this great sort of bouncy kind of, chanting kind of feel to it. It was definitely a fun song to play. It was definitely a great song to see come together in the studio, the actual recording studio with Flood and Alan, and then just see it in the mixing stages, the way Alan kind of made it really just bounce, and those choruses really bounce and make those kicks, and the choruses just have this like really great sort of, I don't know, you really feel them.
Into the Night was a challenging and a really like satisfyingly challenging song to write. I feel like Daniel brought a guitar progression that has like, I don't know, I mean, I got called out for referring to prog because someone's like, it's not really prog, but it has like a odd time signature that then shifts kind of mid-verse from like 13 beat sequence to a 15 beat sequence, I think. And it even does that at like strange places where it's like it could be something that had we composed that song one way, I feel like it could feel quite mathy. But I think, trying to find a way to make the sequences cycle in such a way that you don't notice that suddenly they're dropping beats or adding beats and that you're just swimming along with it in a groove, And I think that Sam and I kind of really had a fun time mapping out the bass line and the drum part so that it doesn't feel complicated, even though it's doing kind of weird stuff.
There's nothing left to stop it.
There's a few songs on this record where the working title that Daniel had for his instrumental became the actual title for the song. So Mr. Credit was one of those examples where I guess that comes from the movie M.
Yeah, it comes from a 1930s movie called M, and it's just like a line that gets thrown out there that just caught my attention. I really liked it, and so I just referenced it, and somehow it stuck through the writing process, which was cool.
Mr. Credit was an interesting experience. I think Flood had some very cool input on that one where he there's like a section in the original composition where towards the end of the song we kind of get to this like rock and roll arrival of just like bombast, and I think he had this really clever idea of like, let's take that most bombastic thing and kind of begin the song that way. So right now the song begins with this sort of instrumental like ramping up of intensity and then cuts all the way back, and then the song proper starts. And I think it's just like a cool way, just like rock and roll fuel injection sort of trick to kind of have the song start big. And then
Something changed, I got it.
I mean, I think Something Changed represents another instance of just kind of a good chemistry and alchemy between Daniel and I, because Something Changed was also a working title. So, you know, he wrote the piece of music on piano and then just had the title Something Changed. And then I received that and sort of worked from there. And normally I don't feel beholden, you know, to the working title in any way, especially not to impact the lyric. Sometimes we'll keep the working title, like in the case of Tony, but it doesn't impact the lyric. And then sometimes like Mr. Credit or Something Changed, I actually say like, I actually find that that's a compelling starting point for me to look at this track. So I think that song to me is a bit of like a relationship adventure of, you know, to reference a Frank Black song, The Adventure and the Resolution. And I think it's, to me, it's kind of like a couple going through adversity between themselves and then also between, you know, with the outside world. And then it sort of parallels and doubles into just sort of like a person in society as everything is sort of changing and in flux, and kind of like, do you, you know, stand up in rebellion or defiance, or sort of internalize the outward struggle, or, you know, rail against it.
Draw me a million years, and I'll probably make them my home. Eternity brought me tears. It's the cold I collect on my own. Call me.
That was a fun one just to play together. Like, feel like, no, that was one of the tracks that we first circulated before we started. We could actually get together in the room and jam.
Renegade Hearts.
Renegade Hearts. That one. I prefer that one. No. But it was also another song that like Flood went deep into, I think, on the production level, and exploring different ways of, certainly from like a rhythmic standpoint of, you know, the layers and how we can go about it, which I think we're all into, and just trying to be very open about where can we, you know, where could this go besides where we had, you know, brought it so far as like from the initial stages of just playing together. And so consequently it has this cool rhythmic aspect to it that's sort of part of the undercurrent, and Sam's got like 12 arms in this one, in the best of ways. But then it's got this really like lovely outro. Paul's vocals are incredible, and you could just feel like the outro could just keep looping. It goes on for a considerable amount of time, but it just keep going. There's something about that. You can just stay in this sort of trance-like moment where we just hit this plateau and we just, you know, keep on grooving at that same level. There's something about it. It's a fun song to play live.
I'm on the other side of make-believe. If I go unchecked, will the world make of me? I don't feel hunted, but I feel fate.
Passenger was a song that Daniel sent around also early on. I think it was like what I heard to be the chorus. I felt like we need Mo. We need Mo with that sweet, sweet chorus, Daniel. So There was a little bit of like a copy-paste job, I think, done on the original demo, which actually maybe makes the structure is like a little bit strange, because I think where I wanted to loop it isn't even where you would intend. Like it wasn't even a loopable section, I think, maybe.
It's a crazy, like, just, yeah, it's just like the chorus itself, just one sequence is already like bananas, so, and it's intuitive where you thought it should be a second one. It just makes, so, you know, an already bananas chorus sequence even more.
Right.
But it works.
Yeah, like sometimes I think Daniel has like an inner structure that I hear differently. And so in this case, it was kind of like, there's no problem with what is there, but I just would like more of this moment. So I kind of like added it. And then, yeah, I think for me, it's one of my favorite of the guitar progressions on the record. And I feel like the transition from the verse to the chorus is particularly beautiful. So I had this idea early on of like, I would really like to keep it very minimal, where it's just my vocal and his guitar before other elements come in. And like it was really important to maintain the transition from verse to chorus, because I just felt like it's like a flower blooming, and I think I don't want to obscure that by adding second guitar or bass. So let's just like let it, ride as a minimal thing. And I think ultimately we wound up like kind of having a drum loop, but other than that we did maintain that minimalism, and I think that was important because I think it really shows just sort of how much can change just as the guitar changes, and the vocal melody adjusts too, and I think it does a lot in the first chorus.
Kept along, I got nothing but my own dreams. Just these old things, few libations necessary.
Greenwich was a fun one. That was, I think, one of the times where when I listened to Daniel's demo, it was like, this is crazy. I had a lot of fun, a little bit like with Into the Night, trying to figure out how to make a bass line that felt organic and not kind of like hitchy or kind of like too intellectualized, but just rather like vibey. And I feel like I was pretty happy with the outcome on that one. I think that song has like a nice, like gritty Americana to it. And then it has the Angry Man, which is like a favorite part for me on the vocal, which is like a post-chorus vocal that's sort of quiet, sounds like just someone yelling at you, having a meltdown. And then over top, there's like a more mellow vocal. And I do. The Angry Man's one of my favorite parts on the record, actually.
But the Angry Man's also very melodic at the same time. There's like moments where it's just deeply infectious, and even though it's doing what you just said, so it's an interesting personality to have there. Yeah.
It's not that he's necessarily angry, he's just yelling and having a bit of a freak out. And I think actually where it comes from is that there's a very raucous my guitar line underneath what Daniel's doing is really like cacophonous, and I think the vocal is married to the guitar part, like a dissonant thrashing. And I think it's sometimes fun when you have something that's doing that and you like kind of tuck it. I don't know, I feel like for me, I have a passion not just for hip hop, but also for kind of like aggro dissonant, Nirvana in its like most dissonant, and sort of like Pixies, same kind of like just like the real edgy shit. And I really do like some like metal and some edgy stuff. And so anytime where it works naturally in our band, I definitely like having something in there that just sort of like rubs a little bit and grates and kind of like has a like an aggression to it.
On the streets of Cozumel, where my age is slow, the mirror treats my light to a gray refrain.
Grand Hotel. Let me tell you about Grand Hotel.
That one was written in a obsolete vernacular.
Oh, that was actually one of the last songs that we wrote for the record, and it was sort of just by the nature of how, we've been saying we had to, because of circumstances, the global circumstances we had when we were all in different countries, we had to trade most of these recordings back and forth, which we hadn't done previously, and we only had two opportunities to get together, before going into the studio to flesh out these songs and play them together. And one was 2 weeks in upstate New York. The second time was for only 10 days in upstate New York. And then we had 3 months off before we started recording. So Grand Hotel is one of the last songs that we started working on the last days of the second session before 3 months drop. And it was sort of like a race against time. Like I had sent around the chord progression to Paul right before that last session. and then Paul, I think it, had a like a great idea with it vocally and I think bass wise too, right? Both.
Yeah, but then the bass didn't make it to the end.
But the vocal melody was there, and the vocal melody is still there, and that became like, okay, well, here's a compass, and this gives us sort of like to get this song hopefully finished before the end of this writing session, which was kind of like a good challenge. It was something new for us because we don't usually operate with those sort of circumstances, but these were the circumstances, and they were bigger than us. And we got to the song by the end of that second session where we were able to, Sam had a great beat, and it was really fun to play with by the end of that the last days before we were going to take that break. That you could see, okay, the song has legs, and it's maybe not where it's going to be by the time we finish recording it, but we have an idea of where we wanted to take it. And then in the studio itself, it was a great one to collaborate with Flood on, with all these different ideas about the intro and the body of the song. And then Paul I remember I think I had recorded like my guitar bit, like the actual guitar that's on the recording, and I left, and then Paul's gonna come in for the second half of the day and do maybe vocals, like work on vocals and maybe guitar stuff. I don't even know if that was even scripted, and by the end of that day he'd come up with this killer guitar riff, which is like now like the main anchor to the chorus and to the outro. It was actually that maybe it was bass and guitar riff, it goes together, and it just became like, oh yeah, this song is this. I remember being actually not far from here, like where we are right now, like walking. I had this one because we recorded this record here, and I had like a certain pattern. I was singing in Covent Garden. I would walk like towards Regent's Park before I would call a car and then go to the studio. And I remember walking around here just listening to what Paul had done the night before, and I hadn't heard this idea before, and just being elated, really, really like excited by it, and just being like, oh no, this song has gone from being maybe like, I don't know if it's going to be on the record. I don't know if it's going to become a song yet. It needs a lot more body to being like, oh no, this song's just taken a big turn, and it's going to be a big part of this record, and there it is. And that's what I have to say about Grand Hotel.
The bass line had been one thing, and the engineer, I'd like done the bass for the choruses, and then the engineer had been like, yeah, that's cool, but you want to try anything else? And I was like, okay. And then like it was interesting, like in 40 minutes, I think, like just out of nowhere, like the bass line that's now on the record, and then like all the second, like bass line and two guitar parts came in like 40 minutes, like just arrived and were performed. And it was like definitely one of those times where it's like, I don't know what just happened, but like that just all, printed. And that's like basically exactly as it is now on the record, was just all original shit in 40 minutes time. So it was really a pretty cool session.
Give you what you see, a drunken heartbeat up my sleeve. We'll take it up and come home clean. Believe there's a whole mystic reverie, a sunken signal submarine.
Something happened with Big Shot City where it was like this weird cosmic thing that was a bit accidental, that I remember when years and years ago when we wrote Narc on our second record, Daniel was playing the verse and we were jamming it, and then he switched to the chorus, which I assume he had written, and then in that exact moment I switched to like the chords that I'm currently playing still to this day on Narc. Like just sort of, I didn't know where he was going to go in his composition, but we just made a change that is like, that's the change to the course of Narc, which, how would you know other than just that you're really locked in on some kind of like weird sensibility. But so kind of a similarly random moment happened when we were in the Catskills and he was playing Big Shot City. Or like, I think we both just started playing at the exact same moment, but I didn't know he was going to start playing Big Shot City, and I just happened to play like a bass thing, and that's the bass line to Big Shot City. But it wasn't because like, oh, hey, play that and let me figure something out. It was just like we just both picked up our instruments and instantly played something that we both were like, oh, that's such a weird juxtaposition note-wise what the bass is doing relative to this riff. And that's actually how the verse bass line got written. I don't know if you remember that.
That was a song that was definitely like gave us an opportunity to do this, sort of like in all of us being in the same room and being like, what do you want to take it here? Do you want to do this? Sort of more of in the moment, sort of like decisions that were kind of navigating it left, right, and so forth that took it to where we landed. That was the first one we started working on. That was the first. Wow. I mean, that was the first song that that's the first song that I'd sent that progression around, like it's just and it's just kind of like it's just over and over again, and it's sort of like dynamics, it's the same chord progression that just goes up and down a little bit dynamically, and that was the first thing that Paul worked on and sent back to us. I think it was just bass and vocal at that time, but you already had the the Go Easy line on that verse.
Yeah, and I remember actually that song in Passenger, I kind of wanted the bass line to be really unique. And I think, you know, on Palermo, Go Easy, it's like a fun bass line that I definitely like worked on a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like it's probably the most intimate and hopeful sounding record that we've released.